Bert Breer is in Chicago. He's been to Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota. He goes to Chicago camp today. A guy that used to be in Green Bay is Aaron Rodgers. His first pass of camp was intercepted there in Pittsburgh. But the word out of Pittsburgh sounds like a lot like the word was out of New York when he first got there. Everyone loves him. He's the best. This is a very interesting story this year because there's so much pressure on Tomlin and Rodgers. This is like a legacy thing. Yep. I think this could cost Tomlin his job, which just doesn't happen, obviously, in Pittsburgh. But, you know that half that fan base, if not more, wants Tomlin out of there. And if you give him this quarterback and, he wants this quarterback and they don't make the playoffs, what do you think the chances are he could be gone if they don't make the playoffs?
Well, I think, Fred, that would be more of an organic thing. I can't remember the last time I saw a team so leveraged into a single year. Can you? Where there were so many older players where it was like, okay, this guy's got a year left. This guy's got 2 years left. This guy maybe has 3 left. This guy's got a year left. You go right on down the line and you look at that roster, and I think I made this analogy with you guys earlier in the offseason where they consciously decided when they looked at what they had at the time. Minka Fitzpatrick was still there, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, the makeup of that team. And we've been pretty good the last few years, but because they were never bringing Russell Wilson back. So if we go in on Justin Fields, are we going to be able to get over the top? In other words, do we want to swing and, hit a single or a double, or do we want to load up and swing for the fences? So they took a swing at Matthew Stafford. They wind up with Aaron Rodgers. I think from a big picture perspective, they made that decision. We are going all in to see if we can maximize what we've got left with some of the older guys we have. And so now it's not only TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, but they trade Fitzpatrick for a guy who's older than him and Jalen Ramsey. They bring in Darius Slay. They trade for DK Metcalf, who's not older, but is on his third contract as kind of an old 27-year-old. They're very leveraged for this year. And so what you're talking about, after this year or next, they're going to have to reset everything to begin with. So I think when you use that as your starting point, either in 26 or 27, there's probably going to be a pretty heavy roster reset coming. Well, then isn't that when you ask that question? I don't think they're going to ever fire Tomlin, but isn't that when you sit down and say, okay, this is probably going to take 2 or 3 years to rebuild this thing and get it back where we want it again? Do you want to be a part of it? Do we see you as a part of it? I think they're going to naturally come to that point in the next year or two where those sorts of big picture questions are going to be asked. This is his 19th year there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. And then depending on how this year goes, I think those questions sort of come up naturally.
Do you think that do you think Tomlin would want to stay? And if they don't make the playoffs and he quote unquote leaves, how does that affect his job market and legacy?
I think his legacy is secure because he won a Super Bowl. I think he's at the point where it's he could enhance it. But I mean, going 18 years, and I know people make fun of this sometimes, but going 18 years without having a losing season in the NFL is pretty remarkable, So I think it says something about who Mike Tomlin is and being able to constantly reinvent himself and keep guys motivated, There's that old, I think it was Pat Riley said it, in the 80s or whatever that, or maybe it was Bill Walsh. It was one of those guys who said something about after 10 years, a coach's message gets stale and they need to change him out. And so the fact that, he's kind of, been able to have that level of success and maintain it after losing Ben Roethlisberger is pretty remarkable. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's that idea, does that program need updating? And does Mike Tomlin need the reset where he's going to go up and update his own program? And can that happen in Pittsburgh with them together? those are the big picture questions I think you've got to ask,
But so much
But I
of it,
think, but I think he certainly have a market. I think he'd 100% have a market.
I
Yes.
think you would too, but I guess I'm surprised, or maybe I'm hearing you wrong. Like, how much of this depends on Aaron Rodgers' performance? Because that doesn't have a lot to do with Tomlin. He's his own entity, and I don't think
Right.
it's Tomlin's desire to have him there. So, how
Well,
can
is that true? Is it not Tomlin's desire to have him there?
No, I think Tomlin wanted to have a quarterback he could win with right now. Yeah, no,
all right?
Tomlin's on board with this. I mean, this is again like this is like in a lot of ways, this is the price for striking out on Kenny Pickett, is that you strike out on Kenny Pickett and like based on where they are from a team standpoint, this is Kenny Pickett's, I think, fourth year. So this should be when their first round quarterback from 2022 is just hitting his stride and is becoming a top quarterback. So they had to do something at the position. And I think they felt like they could have gotten a good year out of Justin Fields. But they weren't going to level up the way that they want to level up and, put what's been, an 8, 9, 10 win team. They aren't going to put that team over the top with Justin Fields. They needed something more. And so they take this big swing and there's the risk because of his age and everything else that you swing and miss. But I think they would rather swing and miss swinging through the fences than swinging for a single or a double.
Fields didn't turn him down.
Well, he did, but what Fields was looking for was guarantees into the second year
Hmm.
and a contract that would sort of signify you're going to give me some real runway to start. And I don't. The Steelers were at a point with Fields where I think they were looking at the idea, okay, we bring him back and we want to keep developing him and we want to keep working with him, but that doesn't mean we want to walk away from an opportunity like an Aaron Rodgers type of opportunity if it comes along.
Okay. Who do you think they'd be better with? Justin Fields or Aaron
I mean, if
Rodgers?
Rodgers plays the way, I mean, again, like Fred, like if Rodgers plays like the way he did in a couple games down the stretch, then Aaron Rodgers, right? Like he can still really, really throw it, And I've asked some people just, over the last, and like kind of catching up with people the last few days about Aaron. His name's come up, and what everybody says is the arm talent, like that's still there. I think the bigger picture questions with Aaron, the Vikings looked at him. I was with them the other day, and their assessment on him, like, they took a very hard look at him, and the arm talent is all still there. Like, where their questions were, is he hanging in the pocket the same way, right? Like, is he willing to take a hit the same way? Because that's what happens with older quarterbacks. Sometimes they're not as willing to take a hit because their bodies are more beat up, and so their clock speeds up. So, like, the question was, is he as willing to take a hit? And is he moving around the same way? Like that,
Well,
those
then the answers to both those questions are obvious.
Is he moving around the same way? Because that's not good.
No, because he can't move, which
yeah.
is
So, but again, like last year was the first year coming back off an Achilles for an older player. So maybe that looks a little bit better this year.
okay. Let's get into that for a second. Do you really believe that he's going to be like fresh as a daisy this year? That like it took that extra time, and now a year older, and with all that punishment of last season, his leg's going to be 10 times
Yeah.
better.
I don't know, but I would say like that an Achilles for an older player is one of those injuries that generally can take an extra year. Like Cousins is the other example, right? Like so Cousins was dealing with the same sort of thing. And I know from people who looked at Cousins tape from last year, what they saw was a guy who couldn't drive the ball early in the year, couldn't drive the ball the same way. The first 4, 5, 6 weeks, that's what it was. And then there was a game against Tampa, I think it was the beginning of October, where all of a sudden he started to look like himself again. And then he built some momentum and he started to play better. And then he kind of reverted. And you saw the same issues you saw earlier in the year. So I think for an older player with that injury, that first year can be a little bit of a minefield. So again, like I'm not saying it's automatic that he's going to come back and be who he was, even 3 or 4 years ago. But there is a chance based on some of the history with older players with that injury.
Well, he wasn't great 3 years ago. So
We won the MVP, what, in 21? Is that right? Or was it 21, right?
What 21 when what? He went to the playoffs last?
No, he won the MVP.
Well, he didn't win it in 22. And
I think he won it. He won it 2 years in a row. Though, was it 19 and 20 or was it 20 and 21? Because he won it twice with LaFleur, didn't he?
I don't know. I know that they lost to
It
the
sounds
Lions
right.
in that last game.
It also just seems like that's been a really long 3 years. Like
No, it has. You're absolutely right, Hardy. It has.
Well, he's also gotten into his 40s, and he's a prick. So, and he lets the play clock run out because he's analyzing.
I mean, the question is, can he have that Favre year? You know what I mean? Like, and we didn't see it with the Jets. But there was that Favre year where Favre got he looked pretty good for the Jets, then tore his biceps. Was it? Is that right, Fred? I think right, and just looked like he couldn't play down the stretch. Then he comes back the next year and was awesome with the Vikings the first year, and then was a shell of himself his second year with the Vikings. So, I'm looking at the MVP thing, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the question. It's not like can he play another 2 or 3 years. It's like can he squeeze that 1 year out of himself?
Yeah, I mean, Favre I think won 7 or 8 games that season for the Jets. They were playing for the playoffs the last game of the year. I mean, Rodgers was an abject disaster. So
Rodgers was the MVP in 21, by the way.
All right, so 21, and he was the MVP, and that was the one where he wouldn't run into. That was the NFC Championship game where they had home field, and you wouldn't run into.
That was the year before. Before.
Okay, so the year before that was the NFC Championship game that he wouldn't run into the end zone.
They lost and they lost to San Francisco, if you guys remember.
Hello.
In that really cold game in 21.
Ooh, it's cold in San Francisco.
Well, that's another old man thing, right? I mean, I don't handle the cold as well as I used to.
Oh, I handle it like a champ. I get in that cold plunge.
Yeah, he needs to cold plunge. You think Aaron Rodgers would be all over that?
Yeah, he probably not have the. He's in those darkness retreats. I say sack up and get in the. Let's take a sack lunch into the dang cold plunge. All right, so
go ahead.
Let's
just bounce to another team here. Are you hearing anything about Raiders camp and how things are there with Pete Carroll and the new look Las Vegas Raiders?
Yeah, the Christian Wilkins thing is interesting, huh? There's been a dispute for a while over his rehab plan, and that's not great. That's not a great start. That you're dealing with that. The guy signed I think it was 110 over 4, a monster contract a year ago as a free agent brought in by, the Antonio Pierce, Tom Telesco group. And there was some disagreement over his rehab plan. And the fact that the guy reports to camp and then is cut a week later. I was having this discussion with another guy with another team last night where it was if you're planning to get rid of the guy, and that's just you've just decided to move on, you do it before training camp. So the fact that the guy reported to training camp and then you're cutting him days later is sort of interesting. I think they expect to be better. I think they'll get a lot out of Ashton Genty as a rookie. Brock Bowers, I think, will be one of the best players in football at any position. The offensive line is going to be a lot better. They should be better at quarterback with Geno. And, you have Pete Carroll coaching the defense. So I think that's a really good division. The AFC West is a really, really good division. So they may not get more than 6 wins, but I think they'll be better.
Okay. I just wonder, in terms of, the attitude and the atmosphere there with Pete Carroll. I mean, he's a different guy. I don't know how many coaches you can say that about. Probably, still have in 2025 a unique philosophy and mood that they bring to the locker room. A lot of them have, come from somewhere else, and they're trying to imitate something.
That's there. That's what you're asking, Hardy. That's there. I mean,
the Pete Carroll thing is been implemented.
There. Yeah. I mean, it's and I remember talking to Geno about this, and that was if you look at Geno. He washed out of the Jets, then he washed out of the Chargers, and his career was kind of on life support. And he did this series of 1-year deals. A lot of times those guys will bounce around one year here, 1 year there, trying to find a place where they can get more playing time. And Geno kept going back to Seattle. I think it was 3 or 4 years in a row on 1-year deals. And I remember asking him why he did that. And he said, because I had never been in an atmosphere like this before. And it kind of dawned on me like, when you went to Seattle and Pete Carroll had it rolling, that place was unlike anywhere else. And it's hard to put your finger on what it was, but he just had a way of getting the whole place pulling in the same direction. And there was a bounce and an edge, and it's not like, I know a lot of people in New England like thought like it was this happy-go-lucky thing. That's not what it was in Seattle. In Seattle, it was, I mean, the practices were wars. There was this energy to the team that I think was very unique to Pete. And from what I understand, you're already seeing signs of that in Vegas, which is good considering Pete's 74 years old. I hope I'm moving around like he does when I'm his age.
Well, I would like to get into because that's the first team that the Patriots
Yep.
play and expectations of that game in the season. If we can get into that, we will do so coming up in just a moment with Burt Breer.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.